Geraldine Jackson's hands trembled against Chan Min-gu's chest as the last barrier of clothing fell away. The amber glow from Seoul's skyline filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shadows across the dragon tattoo that coiled up his torso. Scales so detailed they seemed to move with each breath he took. But it wasn't the ink that made her freeze. It wasn't the scars either, though there were plenty, silvered lines mapping violence across golden skin that should have terrified her. Her gaze dropped lower, her breath caught. "You're so..." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and Geraldine's cheeks burned with a mixture of panic and something far more dangerous. She'd been with men before, but this, Min-gu's fingers curved under her chin, tilting her face up until their eyes met. His were dark, unreadable, except for the predatory gleam that made her heart slam against her ribs. "I'll be gentle," he promised, voice dropping to gravel that vibrated through her entire body. The contradiction in those words, the barely leashed violence in his grip versus the reverence in his tone, sent electricity racing down her.
Welcome to Empire Line Stories TV, the home of Afro-Korean storytelling lovers. If you love and want more Afro-Korean airs, dramatic plot twists, dangerous romance, billionaire families, and dangerous secrets, show some love, kindly like the video and hit the subscribe button. This story is only getting started. Only real fans make it to the next story. You're part of the lineage now, no turning back.
Spine. Geraldine opened her mouth to respond, but Min-gu's thumb brushed across her bottom lip and coherent thoughts scattered. "Unless," he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath ghosted against her ear, "you ask me not to be." 12 hours earlier, Geraldine had no idea her Chicago law career would end like this. She'd walked into that Gangnam conference room like she owned it. Spine straight, leather portfolio clutched tight, every inch the Northwestern law graduate who'd clawed her way out of foster care through sheer will. At 32, she'd perfected the art of looking untouchable. The Korean investors sat in a neat row, faces professionally blank. Except for one man. He lounged at the head of the table like a king holding court, dark suit tailored perfectly to broad shoulders, one hand drumming an idle rhythm against mahogany. When Geraldine entered, his fingers stilled. His gaze locked onto her with an intensity that felt physical. She'd researched the investment group, read every file her firm provided. Nowhere in those documents did it mention that Chan Min-gu looked like sin poured into Armani, or that his stare could make her forget every professional boundary she'd ever built. "Miss Jackson." His English was accented, precise. "Please sit." Geraldine sat, crossing her legs and flipping open her portfolio with practiced ease. "Gentlemen, I've reviewed your proposal. There are several discrepancies we need to address." Min-gu's lips curved, not quite a smile, more an acknowledgement of challenge accepted. "Discrepancies?" Clause 17 contradicts Clause 9. The zoning permits you've listed don't exist for the Itaewon property, and she met his eyes directly, refusing to flinch. The projected ROI is mathematically impossible unless you're laundering money. Silence crashed through the room. One of the other men inhaled sharply. Another's hand moved toward his jacket, but Min-gu laughed. The sound was rough, genuinely surprised, and it transformed his face from dangerous to devastatingly handsome. "I like her," he said in Korean to his associates, not breaking eye contact with Geraldine. She didn't speak Korean, but she understood the shift in power dynamics when Min-gu stood, buttoning his jacket. "Dinner, tonight, then we'll renegotiate." "Mr. Chan." "Min-gu," he corrected, moving around the table with predatory grace. He stopped close enough that Geraldine caught expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Smoke, maybe, or danger itself. "And this isn't a negotiation, Ms. Jackson. It's an inevitability." She should have said no, should have recognized the warning signs screaming in her gut. "One dinner," she agreed, hating how breathless she sounded. The restaurant Min-gu chose wasn't on any tourist map. Tucked down a Hongdae alley, it required 3 passwords and a retinal scan to enter. Red silk lanterns cast shadows across low tables where men in expensive suits conducted business in hushed tones. Geraldine felt every eye track her entrance, the only black woman in a sea of homogeneity, braids swept into an elegant bun, burgundy dress clinging to curves she usually hid under blazers. Mingu stood when she approached, and something flickered in his expression. Hunger, yes, but also reverence. "You're staring," Geraldine said, sliding into the seat across from him. "You're beautiful." The bluntness caught her off guard. Men in her world, corporate lawyers, hedge fund managers, they flirted with innuendo, played games. Mingu stated facts like he stated terms in contracts. "Flattery won't fix your bogus permits," she countered, but her voice wavered. Mingu poured soju into 2 glasses, his hands steady in a way that suggested he'd done far worse things with them than serve alcohol. "I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to understand why you walk into rooms like you're ready for war." The question landed like a punch. Geraldine reached for her glass, needing something to do with her trembling fingers. "Maybe because I've fought my whole life to be in those rooms." "Who hurt you that badly?" She wouldn't realize until much later that Mingu asked questions the way he negotiated, strategically, hunting for vulnerabilities to exploit. 3 glasses of soju later, Geraldine told him everything. Foster homes that never felt like home, working 2 jobs through law school, her ex, married of course, whose text messages still lit up her phone at 2 a.m. Mingu listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each confession. When she finished, he leaned forward. "He texts you?" "It doesn't matter." "Give me his number." "What? No." But Geraldine laughed despite herself, the absurdity-breaking tension she'd carried for months. "You can't just threaten every man who's wronged me." Mingu's smile turned sharp. "I can do far worse than threaten." If you're already hooked on Geraldine and Mingu's story, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, things are about to get a lot more dangerous and a lot more passionate. This is one romance you don't want to miss. And that's when she knew this man was dangerous. Not just physically, though the violence coiled in his shoulders was obvious, but dangerous to her carefully constructed walls, her determination to never need anyone. "One more drink," she whispered. 1 became 2. 2 became Mingu's driver opening the car door, his knowing smirk in the rearview mirror. The elevator ride to his penthouse was a blur of heated glances and almost touches, Mingu's restraint visibly fraying. They stumbled through his door and the city lights spread before them like a kingdom. Geraldine turned, found Mingu watching her with an expression that stole her breath. "If you want to leave," he started. She kissed him. Mingu responded like a man starving, hands sliding into her braids, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. Geraldine's portfolio hit the floor. Her blazer followed, his jacket, her dress, until she stood before him in nothing but skin and vulnerability, and he was doing the same, and her eyes traveled down that tattooed torso to, "You're so..." The words escaped again. Wonder and nervousness tangled together. Mingu's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I'll be gentle," he promised. But the heat in his eyes suggested gentle was the last thing either of them wanted. By morning, Geraldine wouldn't just struggle to walk. She'd struggle to remember who she was before Chan Mingu, and that should have been her first warning. Geraldine woke to sunlight slicing through unfamiliar windows and a body that felt like it had been thoroughly claimed. Every muscle ached in ways that made her cheeks burn, not from pain exactly, but from the vivid memories of how she'd earned each tender spot. She tried to sit up. Her thighs screamed in protest. "Easy!" Mingu's voice came from beside her, rough with sleep. He lay propped on one elbow, dark hair falling across his forehead, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The dragon tattoo coiled across his chest seemed almost alive in the morning light. "I warned you I'd be gentle. You're the one who begged me to stop. Heat flooded Geraldine's face. I did not beg. You did. His fingers ghosted along her jaw, and the tenderness in the touch contradicted the sin in his smile. Multiple times, very prettily. She should leave. Her flight to Chicago, her partnership review, her entire carefully constructed life waded across an ocean. But when she reached for her dress, crumpled on the floor, Mingu's hand circled her wrist. Stay. Not a question. Command wrapped in silk. One more day. Geraldine Jackson had built a career on making smart decisions. This wasn't one of them. Okay, she whispered. Mingu's soul was nothing like the guidebooks. He took her to a street market in Mangwon where ajumas sold teokbokki from steaming carts. Their eyes widening when they saw Geraldine, the only black woman for blocks, but softening when Mingu spoke rapid Korean, his hand possessive at the small of her back. He bought her hotteok dripping with honey, and when she got it all over her fingers, he sucked the sweetness from her thumb in a way that made her forget they were in public. People are staring, Geraldine murmured. Let them. Mingu's eyes held a dangerous edge beneath the affection. They need to know you're mine. That word again. Mine. It should have set off alarms. Instead, it sent electricity down her spine. They walked along Cheonggyecheon Stream, and for the first time, Mingu talked about his childhood. Abandoned at 6, raised by men who taught him violence before they taught him to read. His voice stayed steady, matter of fact, but Geraldine saw the white-knuckled grip on the railing. Is that how you got the scars? She asked softly. Mingu glanced at her, something raw flickering behind his eyes. Some. Others I earned protecting what's mine. He pulled her closer, his nose brushing her temple. I'd earn 1,000 more for you. The certainty in his voice made her chest tight. They'd known each other 36 hours. This was insane. But when Mingu kissed her against the stream's stone wall, the city blurring around them, insanity felt like the only rational choice. What Geraldine didn't see was Mingu's phone lighting up in his pocket. 17 missed calls, a crisis brewing that would shatter everything. Back at the penthouse, Mingu pressed her against the door before it fully closed, kissing her with an urgency that felt like desperation. Geraldine's hands fisted in his shirt, and when he lifted her, thighs wrapping around his waist despite the ache, she didn't protest. Again? She gasped against his mouth. Again, he confirmed, carrying her toward the bedroom, until you forget you ever planned to leave. Hours later, Geraldine lay boneless against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Mingu's fingers traced lazy patterns down her spine, and she felt herself drifting when his phone erupted on the nightstand. He tensed immediately. Every muscle turned to stone. Don't answer it, Geraldine murmured. But Mingu was already reaching, his expression shuddering as he read the screen. He answered in clipped Korean, and even without understanding the words, Geraldine heard the shift from lover to something cold and lethal. His free hand tightened on her hip, almost bruising before he seemed to remember himself and gentled. The call lasted 90 seconds. When Mingu hung up, the man who'd fed her honey-soaked pastries was gone. In his place sat someone dangerous. You need to leave Seoul, he said quietly. Today. Geraldine sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. Ice flooded her veins at his tone. What? Your firm didn't send you here for a legitimate deal. Mingu's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking. Your senior partner, Richard Vaughn, embezzled $40 million from my family's investments. He created fake documents, fake permits, everything you found discrepancies in, and he sent you here to take the fall while he disappeared with the money. The room tilted. Geraldine's mind raced through the past week, Vaughn insisting she handle Seoul personally, his unusual eagerness, the way he'd smiled at the airport. No, she whispered. He wouldn't. My people want blood. Mingu's voice cracked. They want your blood as restitution. I told them you're innocent, but what? But I'm just one voice, Geraldine. The council meets in 72 hours to vote on your punishment. Punishment? Such a sterile word for execution. Geraldine scrambled out of bed, legs shaking, from fear now, not pleasure. This is insane. I didn't steal anything. I know. Mingu was on his feet, gripping her shoulders. But my underboss doesn't care. They need someone to pay, and you're here. Convenient. Then I'll go to the embassy. The police, you'll be dead before you reach the street. The certainty in his voice made her stomach drop. This man who'd worshipped her body hours ago was now telling her she was marked for death. Why are you telling me this? Her voice broke. Why not just let them? Mingu kissed her, hard, desperate, his hands cradling her face like she was infinitely precious. When he pulled back, his eyes were raw with something that looked like anguish. Because I choose you, he said, over my oath, over my position, over everything. You're under my protection now. What does that mean? It means we have 72 hours to prove your innocence and recover the 40 million. If we do both, the council might let you live. His thumb traced her cheekbone. And it means if they come for you anyway, they go through me first. Geraldine's chest constricted. You'd die for me. We just met. I'd kill for you. Mingu's smile was sharp, dangerous, completely honest. Dying would be easier. Geraldine had thought the most dangerous thing about Chan Mingu was how he made her feel. She was wrong. The most dangerous thing was that he meant every word, and 72 hours might not be enough time to save either of them. Geraldine didn't sleep. She sat curled on Mingu's leather couch, wearing one of his shirts that drowned her frame, while he paced the penthouse like a caged predator. His phone pressed to his ear, switching between Korean and English as he barked orders. Outside, Seoul glittered, oblivious, beautiful, deadly. I don't care what Ji-hoon thinks, Mingu snapped in English, clearly for, her benefit. She doesn't leave my sight. Find Vaughn's last known location and send it to my secure line. He hung up, dragged a hand through his hair, and finally looked at her. The exhaustion in his eyes made him look almost vulnerable. Almost. We're leaving in 2 hours, he said. I have a safe house on Jeju Island where you'll be protected while my team hunts Vaughn. Geraldine's lawyer brain kicked in despite the panic. What about evidence? I have access to the firm's servers. If I can log in remotely and pull the original contracts... Smart. Mingu crossed to her, crouching so they were eye level. His hands settled on her knees, warm and grounding. Bring your laptop. We'll work the legal angle while my people work the street angle. Your people. She tested the words. You mean the syndicate? Yes. No apology, no shame, just brutal honesty. Geraldine should have demanded he take her to the embassy despite the danger. But sitting here in his shirt, his hands steady on her skin, she felt safer than she had in years. Okay, she whispered. Mingu's thumb traced circles on her knee, and the tenderness in the gesture contradicted everything she knew about him. Get some rest. I'll wake you when it's time. But rest was impossible. Every time Geraldine closed her eyes, she saw Richard Vaughn smile at the airport, felt the weight of 40 million in stolen money crushing her chest. What she didn't know was that the next 70 hours would test more than her survival instincts. They'd test whether love could grow in the shadow of death. The private jet was obscene, all cream leather and dark wood, a flying mansion that probably cost more than her law school debt. Mingu had gotten them to a private airstrip outside Seoul where no customs, no security, no witnesses watched them board. Dawn light streamed through the windows as they leveled out over the ocean. Mingu poured amber liquid into crystal glasses. Whiskey for breakfast? Geraldine asked. We both need it. He handed her a glass, their fingers brushing, and that simple touch sent electricity up her arm. She took a sip, letting the burn steady her. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why risk everything for me? Geraldine met his eyes. You could have let your people handle this, could have washed your hands of the stupid American lawyer. Why? Mingu was quiet, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, close enough that she smelled his cologne. You walked into that conference room like you owned it, he said softly, called out my lies without flinching. And last night, when you told me about your ex, your foster homes, you weren't asking for pity. You were just honest. His jaw tightened. You make me want to be more than this, more than violence and blood money and deals made in shadows. Her breath caught. That's not an answer. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. And who do I see? Someone worth saving. The confession hung between them, raw and dangerous. Geraldine set down her glass and crossed the narrow aisle, settling herself in Mingu's lap. His arms came around her immediately, possessive and protective. We barely know each other, she whispered against his throat. I know you take your coffee black. You tap your pen 3 times before signing documents. Mingu's fingers traced her spine and she shivered. I know you're brilliant and brave and so goddamn beautiful it hurts to look at you. That's obsession. I'm aware. His smile was dark, unapologetic. He kissed her before she could respond. Deep, claiming, swallowing whatever protest she might have made. Geraldine melted into him, and when his hand slid beneath the hem of his shirt she wore, fingers splaying across bare skin, she gasped into his mouth. Here? She breathed. Everywhere, Mingu growled against her lips. Every chance I get, until you understand you're mine. That word again. Mine. It should have terrified her. Instead, it made her burn. The Jeju safe house was a traditional hanok tucked into volcanic cliffs overlooking the ocean, all clean lines and paper doors, surrounded by camellia trees. Beautiful, isolated, a gilded cage. Mingu's phone buzzed as they entered. His expression darkened as he read the screen. My tech team found Vaughn, he said. Manila, Shangri-La Hotel under a fake name. But there's a problem. Geraldine's stomach dropped. What problem? He emptied 3 offshore accounts this morning. The money's moving through shell companies. We can't trace it yet. Mingu's knuckles went white around the phone. I'm sending my best team to grab him, but even if they succeed, recovering the funds will take time. How much time do we have left? 68 hours before the council votes. The number felt like a countdown to her execution. Geraldine sank onto the low couch, mind racing through legal strategies that all dead-ended at the same truth. Syndicate justice didn't work like American courts. Mingu sat beside her, pulling her against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, an anchor in the chaos. I won't let them touch you, he murmured into her hair. Whatever it takes. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. Geraldine tilted her head back, studying his face. The hard lines, the scars, the eyes that held too much darkness. But when he looked at her, something soft emerged. Something that made her chest ache. You're insane, she whispered. About you? Completely. He kissed her slowly this time, thoroughly, like he had all the time in the world instead of 68 hours. His hands mapped her body with devastating patience, tracing her curves, learning her responses, until Geraldine was trembling against him. Mingu, she gasped when his mouth moved to her throat. We need to focus on... I am focused. His teeth grazed her pulse point and coherent thoughts scattered. Focused on making sure you know exactly how much you matter, how far I'll go. He proved it with his hands, his mouth, the way he worshipped every inch of her until she forgot about Vaughn and councils and death sentences, until there was only Mingu and the way he made her feel, claimed, cherished, completely undone. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the couch, the ocean crashing against cliffs outside. Geraldine traced the dragon tattoo across his chest, following scales up to his shoulder. Tell me about this, she said softly. Mingu caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I got it when I became the boss. The dragon represents power, protection. It's supposed to be a warning." His smile turned rueful. "But you're not afraid of it." "Should I be?" "Probably." He tucked a braid behind her ear. "I'm not a good man, Geraldine. The things I've done, I don't care about what you've done." She met his eyes. "I care about what you're doing now, for me." Mingu's expression cracked open, raw vulnerability spilling through. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her neck. "You're going to destroy me," he whispered against her skin. Before Geraldine could respond, his phone erupted with a shrill alarm. Mingu grabbed it, and every line of his body went rigid. "What is it?" He looked at her, and ice flooded his expression. "The perimeter's been breached. We have company, multiple vehicles, armed." His jaw clenched. "Someone sold us out. They know we're here." Outside, the sound of car doors slamming echoed through the camellia grove. They had maybe 90 seconds before violence came crashing through those beautiful paper doors. Mingu moved with lethal precision. 1 second, he was holding Geraldine. The next, he'd crossed to the bedroom closet, pulling out a handgun that looked like an extension of his arm. "Bathroom," he ordered, voice cold and controlled. "Lock the door. Don't come out until I say." "I'm not hiding while you—" "Now, Geraldine." The command in his tone made her flinch, but beneath it she heard something else. Terror. Not for himself, for her. She ran. The bathroom was small, traditional, with a single frosted window overlooking the cliffs. Geraldine locked the door with shaking hands and pressed her back against cool tile, heart slamming so hard it hurt. Outside, she heard Mingu speaking rapid Korean, calm, deadly. Then heavier footsteps, multiple sets, boots on wooden floors. A voice responded in accented English. "Mingu Si, the council requests you deliver the American woman, peacefully. The council can go to hell. She's just one woman, not worth dying for." "That's where you're wrong, Tae Yang." Mingu's voice dropped to something dark and dangerous. "She's worth killing for." Geraldine pressed her fist against her mouth. Men were about to die because she'd trusted her firm, because she'd been naive enough to think she could negotiate with criminals and walk away clean. A gunshot cracked through the air. She flinched, bile rising. More shots followed, controlled pops that made her chest constrict. Through the door, she heard grunts, bodies hitting floor, the sickening thud of violence she couldn't see but felt in her bones. Then, silence. "Geraldine." Mingu's voice, rough but steady. "It's safe. Come out." Her hands trembled so badly she could barely turn the lock. When she emerged, Mingu stood in the living room, gun lowered, breathing hard. Blood splattered his white shirt. Not his, she realized with sick relief. Behind him, 3 men lay unconscious, zip-tied and gagged. "You didn't kill them," she whispered. "Not yet." Mingu's eyes were flat, cold. "But if they'd gotten past me to you, I would have painted these walls red." The casualness with which he said it should have terrified her. Instead, something primal in Geraldine responded to the protection, the absolute certainty that this man would burn the world for her. "We need to move," Mingu continued, already pulling out his phone. "They found us once. They'll send more." His gaze locked on hers. "Somewhere they'll never think to look. My childhood home, Busan." The drive to the airport was silent and tense. Mingu kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on Geraldine's thigh, grounding, possessive. Dawn was breaking over the ocean, painting everything gold and red. "How did they find us?" she finally asked. Mingu's jaw clenched. "Someone in my inner circle talked. Only 5 people knew about Jeju." His thumb traced circles on her leg, the gesture at odds with the violence in his voice. "I'll find out who, and I'll make them regret it." The plane was waiting, smaller than before, more utilitarian. The moment they were airborne, Mingu pulled Geraldine into his arms. His voice cracked. "I need to know you're okay, that you're here." She understood. the adrenaline crash, the fear finally catching up. Geraldine cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm okay." Mingu kissed her desperately, hands fisting in her hair, and she tasted fear beneath the hunger. His control was fracturing, the composed mafia boss replaced by a man terrified of losing what he'd found. "If they'd hurt you," he breathed against her mouth. "They didn't. You stopped them." "This time." He pulled back, forehead pressed to hers. "But the council vote is in." He checked his phone, and his expression darkened. 62 hours. My team still hasn't recovered the money, and someone inside my organization just tried to kill you. Geraldine's mind raced. What if I turn myself in, plead my case directly to the council? They'll execute you on the spot. Or they'll listen. I'm a lawyer, Mingu. I know how to argue. No. His voice turned to steel. I won't let you sacrifice yourself. And I won't let you die protecting me. Words hung between them, raw and honest. Mingu stared at her, something breaking open in his expression. You think I'm doing this out of obligation? He said roughly. Some hero complex? We've known each other 4 days. I fell for you in 4 minutes. Mingu's hands framed her face. The moment you walked into that conference room and called me out, you looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster. His thumb traced her lips. I don't care if it's been 4 days or 4 years. You're mine, Geraldine, and I protect what's mine. Tears burned her eyes. This is crazy. I know. He kissed her softly, then deeper, until she melted into him. But I'd rather die protecting you than live knowing I let them take you. What neither of them knew was that the betrayal ran deeper than either suspected, and the next call Mingu received would shatter everything. The Busan safe house was a cramped apartment in Gamcheon Culture Village, buried in a maze of pastel houses stacked up the hillside. Tourists wandered the narrow alleys taking photos, oblivious to the danger hiding among them. Perfect camouflage. Mingu secured the door, 3 deadbolts, reinforced frame, while Geraldine collapsed onto the small couch. Her body finally registered the past 12 hours. No sleep, constant fear, the gunshot still echoing in her skull. Sleep, Mingu said, sitting beside her and pulling her against his chest. I'll keep watch. You need rest, too. I'll rest when you're safe. His fingers threaded through her braids, gentle despite the violence those same hands had committed hours ago. Geraldine wanted to argue, but exhaustion dragged her under. She woke to late afternoon light slanting through windows, and Mingu's voice, low, urgent Korean into his phone. She kept still, listening to the cadence, heard when shock bled into something colder. He hung up, sat silent. What happened? Geraldine murmured. Mingu looked at her, and the devastation in his eyes made her chest constrict. My underboss, Ji-hoon. His voice was hollow. The one who wanted you dead from the beginning. He's the one who sold us out. He's been working with Vaughn the entire time. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. What? Money. Power. Ji-hoon thought he could take my position if he delivered you to the council, recovered the funds himself, made me look weak. Mingu's hands clenched. I've known him since we were children. Trusted him with everything. Geraldine gripped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. She saw the hurt there, not just tactical betrayal, but personal devastation. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't apologize for him. Mingu's voice cracked. He made his choice. Where is he now? My loyal men have him. He'll face syndicate justice. The cruelty in his smile made her shiver. But first, he's giving us everything. Vaughn's exact location in Manila, the account numbers, everything. Hope flared. The money? Ji-hoon says Vaughn kept detailed transaction records. Insurance in case their partnership went bad. My team's moving on him now. Mingu checked his watch. We should have him in 3 hours. It was the first good news in days. Geraldine felt tears of relief building. Then Mingu's expression shifted to something darker. What? She asked. The council moved up the vote. Ji-hoon's betrayal made them paranoid. They don't know who else is compromised. He pulled her onto his lap, arms tight around her. We don't have 62 hours anymore, Geraldine. We have 36. The number felt like a countdown to execution. 36 hours, she repeated numbly. Even if we recover every dollar, even if we prove your innocence. Min-gu buried his face in her neck. 36 hours might not be enough. Geraldine felt his fear, his desperation, and made a choice. She turned in his lap, straddling him, and kissed him with everything she had, all her terror and gratitude and the impossible feelings growing in her chest. Min-gu responded like a man drowning, hands sliding under her shirt, mapping skin like he was memorizing her. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with need. If we only have 36 hours, Geraldine whispered against his mouth, I don't want to waste them being afraid. He understood, stood with her wrapped around him, and carried her to the small bedroom, laying her down like she was something precious. What followed was slower than before, reverent, almost desperate. Min-gu worshipped every inch of her skin, and Geraldine let herself feel everything. The impossible connection, the terror, the certainty that whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it alone. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the Busan sunset painting the walls orange. Promise me something, Min-gu said quietly. Anything. If it comes down to it, if they give me a choice between my position and your life, his arms tightened. Don't ask me to choose the syndicate. Geraldine's throat closed. Min-gu, I'll burn it all down for you. Every alliance, every oath. You need to know that. She did know, and that terrified her more than the council, more than the ticking clock, because she'd do the same for him. Geraldine woke to Min-gu's phone vibrating against the nightstand, insistent, urgent. He was already awake, she realized, his hand tracing lazy patterns down her spine even as tension coiled through his body. He answered without moving away from her. Talk to me. The voice on the other end was rapid Korean, but Geraldine heard the triumph in it. Min-gu's entire body went still, then he sat up abruptly. You have him. The records too. A pause. Good. I want every account number, every transaction. His free hand found Geraldine's, squeezing tight. And Ji-hoon? Whatever the answer was made Min-gu's expression harden to stone. Keep him alive until I get back to Seoul. He doesn't get the mercy of a quick death. He hung up, turned to Geraldine, and for the first time in days, something like hope flickered in his eyes. They got Vaughn and the transaction records. Relief crashed through her so hard she couldn't breathe. All of it? Every stolen dollar, every shell company, every account. Min-gu pulled her into his lap, pressing his forehead to hers. My financial team is tracing the money now. If we can recover even 70% before the council meets, they might let me live, Geraldine finished. They will let you live, because I'm not giving them another option. The certainty in his voice felt like a vow, but Geraldine's stomach chose that moment to roll violently. She pulled away, hand pressed to her mouth. You okay? Min-gu's concern was immediate. Yeah, just another wave of nausea. Stress, probably. I haven't exactly been eating regularly. But even as she said it, something nagged at her. The exhaustion that felt bone deep. The tenderness in her breasts she'd been ignoring. The fact that her period was... Oh, God. What Geraldine didn't know was that the next hour would reveal a complication that changed everything. Min-gu insisted on stopping at a convenience store on the way to the airport. He bought her crackers, ginger tea, water, hovering like she might shatter. Geraldine felt touched and annoyed in equal measure. I'm fine, she protested. Really? You're pale. When's the last time you ate? She couldn't remember, but as they walked the aisles, Geraldine's eyes caught on a display near the pharmacy section. Pregnancy tests. 3 different brands. pink boxes promising results in minutes. Her heart stopped. No, it was impossible. They'd been careful, mostly. Except that first night when desperation and whiskey had made them reckless, and the second time, and Geraldine? Mingu's voice seemed to come from very far away. What is it? She grabbed a test with shaking hands, didn't look at him. I just need to check something. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like fear and hope tangled together. They didn't speak on the drive back to the Busan safe house. Geraldine clutched the pink box like a lifeline, mind racing through impossible mathematics. 1 week. They'd known each other 1 week. This couldn't be happening. In the small bathroom, she took the test with trembling hands, set the timer on her phone, sat on the closed toilet lid, and stared at the wall, trying not to think, trying not to hope, trying not to panic. The timer went off. 2 pink lines. Clear, unmistakable, completely devastating, pregnant. Geraldine didn't know how long she sat there. Seconds, minutes, hours. Long enough that Mingu knocked softly. "Can I come in?" She opened the door, held out the test wordlessly. Mingu stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked at her, and the expression on his face cracked something open in her chest. Not fear, not regret. Wonder. He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "Pregnant," Geraldine whispered. "I'm pregnant." And just like that, the stakes of survival shifted from saving 1 life to protecting 2. They made it to Seoul in silence, but Mingu's hand never left hers. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, grounding, possessive, reverent. His main office was in Gangnam, a sleek high-rise that looked corporate but felt military. Everyone who passed them had the eyes of killers, and Geraldine felt their stares calculating whether she was worth the chaos. Mingu's hand at the small of her back was a clear answer. Yes. When a scarred older man stepped into their path, Mingu's expression went arctic. "Move, Sang-woo. The council wants to see her. Now. The vote is in 28 hours. She's not a risk. She's mine." Mingu's voice dropped to something lethal. "And if anyone suggests otherwise, they can say it to my face." Sang-woo's eyes held warning. "Your father built this organization on loyalty, not sentiment." The mention of Mingu's father made his jaw clench, but he guided Geraldine past and into a private elevator. "Your father?" she asked quietly. "He was boss before me, died when I was 23. I took over because I was ruthless enough to hold the position." Mingu's hands flexed. "He would have handed you over without a second thought." "But you're not him." "No." He looked at her, one hand drifting to her still flat stomach. "I'm not." The elevator doors opened onto his private floor, and the man waiting inside his office would offer them one chance at survival. The man sitting in Mingu's chair was silver-haired, 60-ish, with violence carved into handsome features. Mingu's uncle, his father's younger brother, who'd helped raise him after his mother left. "Uncle," Mingu said carefully, "I wasn't expecting you." Clearly. The uncle studied Geraldine. "So this is the American lawyer worth burning down everything your father built." "This is Geraldine Jackson," Mingu corrected, stepping between them, "and she's under my protection. Your protection or your obsession." The uncle's smile was sharp. Then he slid his phone across the desk. "Your team recovered 82% of the funds. Impressive. 82%. Relief flooded Geraldine. "But it's not enough," the uncle continued. "The council wants full restitution, and blood, preferably hers." He looked at Mingu. "However, there is an alternative. Marry her." The words hung like a grenade. "There's an old syndicate law," the uncle explained. "Family is untouchable. If she's your wife, killing her means declaring war on you personally. Most council members won't risk it, especially if you've recovered the money." His gaze sharpened. "But it has to be real. Proper Korean ceremony, council witnesses, legal documentation." "And if we don't?" Geraldine asked. "The council votes tomorrow night, and you won't. Survive the outcome." The uncle left. Silence filled the office. Mingu poured whiskey, drained his glass. "You don't have to do this. I can find another way." "What other way?" Geraldine's hand drifted to her stomach. "I'm not just deciding for myself anymore." Mingu's eyes followed the movement. Something fierce and protective blazed across his face. "Ask me," Geraldine whispered. "If you want this, if you want us, ask me properly." He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. They were shaking. "Geraldine Jackson." His voice was rough. "I know this is insane. I know we've barely known each other a week, but I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." He swallowed hard. "You make me want to be more than this. And now," his hand covered hers on her stomach, "now you're carrying my child. So I'm asking, not because it's strategic, but because I want you, both of you." Tears burned her eyes. "Marry me," Mingu said. "Be mine. Let me protect you both." The smart answer was no. The safe answer was no. But Geraldine had spent 32 years playing it safe. "Yes," she whispered. Mingu kissed her like she was oxygen, desperate, reverent, completely undone. When he lifted her onto the desk, she wrapped around him, and for a few stolen moments there was no counsel, no deadline, no danger, just them. 28 hours until the wedding. 28 hours until the vote. And carrying Mingu's child, Geraldine realized she wasn't marrying him just to survive. She was marrying him because she'd fallen impossibly in love. The traditional hanbok felt like armor and vulnerability wrapped into one. Deep crimson silk embroidered with gold phoenixes, the fabric so fine it whispered against Geraldine's skin with every breath. Her braids had been swept into an elegant updo, adorned with jade pins that belonged to Mingu's grandmother, a woman she'd never met but whose legacy she was somehow inheriting. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You look beautiful," said Minseo, Mingu's cousin, and apparently the only female family member willing to acknowledge this wedding wasn't complete insanity. "He won't be able to breathe when he sees you." Geraldine's hand drifted to her stomach, still flat but holding the secret that changed everything. "I can't believe this is happening." "Love rarely makes sense." Minseo adjusted the hanbok's collar with practiced hands, especially not the kind worth dying for. The ceremony was being held in a private hall within the syndicate's headquarters, neutral ground where the council could witness and vote immediately after. 60 guests, all of them dangerous men who'd already decided whether she deserved to live. The thought made Geraldine's hands tremble. "Hey!" Minseo caught her wrist, steadying her. "Mingu chose you over everything. That means something in our world. And if it's not enough?" Minseo's smile was sharp. "Then you'll learn why you don't. Cross a man protecting his family." 28 hours had passed in a blur of preparation, paperwork, and Mingu's team recovering the last fragments of stolen money. Now, standing at the threshold of a wedding that was equal parts love and survival strategy, Geraldine realized she'd never been more terrified or more certain of anything in her life. The ceremony hall was traditional Korean elegance. Low tables, silk cushions, paper lanterns casting warm light across dark wood. The council members sat in rigid formation, faces impassive, but Geraldine felt their assessment like knives. At the front, Mingu waited in a navy hanbok embroidered with dragons. When he saw her, his entire expression transformed, the cold Mafia boss replaced by a man completely undone. Geraldine walked the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no family to witness this impossible choice. Just her and 60 dangerous gazes tracking every step. When she reached Mingu, he took her hands, and the tremble in his grip matched hers. "You're stunning," he whispered in English, low enough only she could hear, "and I'm the luckiest bastard alive." Despite everything, Geraldine smiled, "You clean up pretty well yourself." The officiant began the ceremony in Korean, but Mingu translated the important parts in murmurs. The vows about loyalty, partnership, building a family together. Each word felt like a promise and a weapon against the men watching. When it came time to bow, 3 times to heaven, parents, and each other, Geraldine followed Mingu's lead, feeling the weight of tradition she didn't fully understand but was now bound to. Then Mingu produced the jade ring, intricate carvings of phoenixes and dragons intertwined. He slid it onto her finger with shaking hands. "You're mine now," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Under syndicate law, under Korean tradition, under every protection I can offer. Anyone who touches you declares war on me." It wasn't romantic. It was a threat wrapped in wedding vows. And from the shifting in the council's ranks, the message landed. The officiant pronounced them married. Mingu kissed her, claiming, possessive, completely reverent, and for one perfect moment, Geraldine forgot about the vote waiting on the other side of this ceremony. But the council hadn't forgotten, and the moment Mingu pulled back, his uncle stood, calling the room to order. "The vote," Mingu's uncle announced, his voice cutting through the murmured conversations. "As is tradition when family law is invoked, the council will now determine the legitimacy of this union and the fate of Geraldine Jackson Chan." Geraldine's maiden name paired with Mingu's felt foreign on her tongue, but hearing it spoken aloud made something in her chest tighten. She was truly bound to him now. Mingu's hand found hers, squeezing once. Together. "The financial recovery stands at 91%, the uncle continued, reading from his phone. "Impressive work. However, 3 council members have formally contested this marriage's legitimacy and demand traditional restitution, blood for blood." 3 men stood in the back, older, harder, their expressions promising violence. Mingu stepped forward, positioning himself between Geraldine and the council. "Then let them say it to my face. Let them explain why a woman who was set up by her own firm, who had no knowledge of the theft, who has helped us recover $40 million in 1 week, deserves execution. She's a liability," one of the men, Choi, according to his nameplate, spat. "A foreign lawyer who knows too much about our operations. Today you marry her for protection. Tomorrow she testifies against us to save herself." "She's my wife." Mingu's voice dropped to something lethal. "She carries my child, and if you think I'll let you touch her, you're welcome to try." Shock rippled through the room. Geraldine's pregnancy hadn't been public knowledge until this moment, and the revelation changed calculations across every face. A child. The uncle's eyebrows rose. "That does complicate things." "It simplifies them," Mingu corrected. "She's family now, completely, irrevocably, and syndicate law is clear. Family is untouchable." "Law can be changed," Choi argued, "especially when the family in question threatens our security." "Then change it." Mingu's smile was sharp, dangerous. "But you'll do it over my dead body, and I promise you, Choi, I'll take at least 10 of you with me." The threat hung in the air. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Violence was business, but civil war was something else entirely. This was the moment, the precipice where everything either shattered or held. Then movement from the side. A man stood, younger than most of the council, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Sang-woo, the one who'd warned them in the hallway. "I stand with Mingu," Sang-woo said clearly. His father built this organization on strength and loyalty. Mingu has shown both by recovering our money and protecting what's his. I won't vote against that. Another man stood, then another. Within 30 seconds, half the council was on their feet declaring support. But Choi and his 2 allies remained seated, expressions dark with fury. "This isn't over," Choi said quietly. "A vote divided is no vote at all." "Actually," Mingu's uncle interrupted, pulling out a formal document, "syndicate law requires only a simple majority for family protection votes, 28 to 3. His smile was thin. "I'd say that's decisive." Choi's jaw clenched so hard Geraldine heard his teeth grind, but he stood, bowed stiffly, and left, his two allies following like shadows. The room exhaled collectively. Mingu turned to Geraldine, and the relief in his eyes was so profound it almost brought her to her knees. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck. "We won." He whispered against her skin, "You're safe. You're mine. We won." Geraldine held him tighter, feeling the tremor in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped her like she might disappear. Around them, the council members approached, some with genuine congratulations, others with barely concealed resentment. But they'd won. Against impossible odds, against a deadline that felt like a death sentence, they'd survived. The reception was subdued, but present. Whiskey flowing, careful toasts, the tension slowly bleeding from the room. Mingu never left her side, his arm possessive around her waist, thumb tracing absent patterns on her hip. 91%, Geraldine said quietly. "What happens to the other 9? "It's gone. Vaughn moved it through cryptocurrency before we grabbed him. Untraceable." Mingu's jaw tightened. But 91% of 40 million is enough. The council's greed is satisfied. And Vaughn? Facing charges in Manila, extradition to the U.S., probably 20 years minimum. Mingu's smile was cold, though I made sure the conditions of his holding cell were uncomfortable. Geraldine should have felt guilty about that, should have advocated for proper legal process. But when she thought about Vaughn's smile at the airport, the way he'd set her up to die, she felt only satisfaction. "What about Ji-hoon?" she asked. Mingu's expression went dark. "Syndicate justice. It's handled." She didn't ask for details, didn't want to know. Some parts of Mingu's world she'd have to accept without looking too closely. His uncle approached, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He offered one to Mingu, nodded at Geraldine. "You survived," he said simply. "Both of you. That takes either incredible luck or incredible stubbornness." "Both," Mingu said, pulling Geraldine closer. "Definitely both." The uncle's smile was genuine this time. "Your father would have hated this, but I think he would have respected it." He raised his glass. "To family, however we build it." They toasted, drank, and for the first time in a week, Geraldine felt like she could breathe. By the time the last guest left, exhaustion had Geraldine swaying on her feet. Mingu swept her into his arms without asking, carrying her toward the elevator. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "I know, but I've been wanting to do this all night." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "My wife. My pregnant wife who just survived a syndicate council vote." "When you say it like that, it sounds insane." "It is insane." The elevator doors closed, and Mingu pressed her against the wall, hands framing her face. "But it's ours. This crazy, dangerous, impossible life. It's ours now." Geraldine looked at him. This man who'd chosen her over everything, who'd fought a council of killers for her right to live, who looked at her like she was his entire world. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." Mingu's thumb traced her lips. "And I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving you made the right choice." They'd survived the vote, survived the council, survived impossible odds stacked against them from the start. But as the elevator carried them toward their penthouse, toward their future, Geraldine realized the real challenge was just beginning, building a life together in the shadow of the syndicate, raising their child in this dangerous world, and proving that love could survive even here. 6 months later, Geraldine stood in the renovated hanok in Bukchon, one hand pressed to the small of her aching back, the other resting on her very round belly. Seoul stretched below through traditional paper windows, a city she'd fled to escape, then fought to survive in, and now somehow called home. "You're supposed to be resting," Mingu said from the doorway, crossing to her with that predatory grace that still made her pulse skip. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, hands settling over hers on their daughter's restless movements. "She won't let me rest," Geraldine complained, but she was smiling. Your daughter has apparently inherited your inability to stay still. My daughter is perfect. Mingu pressed a kiss to her neck, just like her mother. 6 months. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime, sometimes like yesterday. The council vote, the terror, the impossible odds, it all felt distant now, softened by the everyday reality of building a life together. Though every day was relative when your husband was a Korean mafia boss. How was the meeting? Geraldine asked. Mingu had spent the morning with his financial team working on what he called legitimate business ventures, slowly, carefully transitioning the syndicate's operations away from the shadowy dealings that had defined his father's reign. Productive. We finalized the tech investment deal. Completely legal. Completely clean. His hands traced patterns on her belly. And I told the council I'm stepping back from field operations after the baby comes. Geraldine twisted in his arms. You did what? Still the boss. Still making decisions. But I'm delegating the dangerous work. Mingu's expression was serious. I made a promise to be here, to watch our daughter grow up, to not make you a widow before she's born. Tears burned Geraldine's eyes. She watched Mingu choose their future over the only life he'd ever known. Thank you, she whispered. He kissed her softly. Don't thank me for wanting to live long enough to annoy you for the next 50 years. The foundation opening was in 2 hours, and while most of Seoul saw it as a simple charity launch, Geraldine knew the syndicate was watching, testing whether Mingu's changes made him weak or proved he was building something that would last. The foundation building was in Itaewon, modern and welcoming, with bright murals painted by local artists. A phoenix rising covered one wall, rebirth, transformation, survival. As guests arrived, Geraldine recognized faces from the council mixed with local officials and social workers. Mingu's uncle appeared with an approving nod, and even Sang-woo showed up with a donation check that made her eyes widen. The syndicate takes care of its own, Sang-woo said simply, and your family now. The words settled something in Geraldine's chest. Family. Not just Mingu, but this complicated, dangerous network of people who'd voted to let her live and were now supporting her dream. Min Seo appeared with a clipboard. We've got 50 applications for the mentorship program already. The scholarship fund is fully endowed for 3 years. It's a start, Geraldine said, emotion thick in her throat. The ceremony was small but meaningful. Geraldine gave a short speech, in English with Min Seo translating, about second chances and found family and investing in kids who'd been told they didn't matter. When she finished, a teenage girl with defiant eyes approached hesitantly. You really grew up in foster care? She asked in careful English. 7 different homes before I aged out. And you're okay now? Geraldine looked at Mingu standing nearby, at her rounded belly, at the foundation they'd built from the ashes of betrayal. I'm more than okay, she said honestly. I'm happy, and I want you to know that's possible for you too. The girl nodded, eyes bright, and walked away with shoulders a little straighter. That shift, that tiny spark of possibility, made every terrifying moment of the past 7 months worth it. 3 weeks later, at 3:47 a.m., Mingu held his daughter for the first time. She was tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would definitely be his. When she wrapped her impossibly small hand around his finger, Geraldine watched her dangerous, ruthless husband completely shatter. She's so small, he whispered, terrified and awed. She's perfect, Geraldine corrected from the hospital bed, exhausted and smiling. Mingu sat beside her carefully, their daughter cradled against his chest like she was made of glass. What do we call her? They'd debated names for months. Korean, American, something honoring both cultures. But looking at her now, Geraldine knew. Hope, she said softly, because that's what she represents. Mingu's eyes were suspiciously bright. Hope. He kissed their daughter's forehead, then leaned over to kiss Geraldine. Thank you. for surviving, for fighting, for giving me this. We gave each other this. It was true. 7 months ago, she'd walked into a Gangnam conference room expecting a standard negotiation, and instead found danger, betrayal, and the love of her life. She'd been hunted, nearly executed, and through it all, Min-gu had chosen her. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Min Seo peeked in, followed by Min-gu's uncle and Sang-woo, all carrying flowers and wearing expressions of genuine warmth. "We won't stay," Min Seo said quickly. "Just wanted to meet her." Min-gu stood, and Geraldine watched as he introduced their daughter to the syndicate members who'd become family. Sang-woo's scarred face softened completely when Hope grabbed his finger. The uncle murmured something in Korean that made Min-gu's jaw clench with emotion. "Your father would have been impossible about this," the uncle said in English, clearly for Geraldine's benefit. "But I think even he would have admitted you chose well." After they left, Min-gu returned to the bed, settling beside Geraldine with Hope still cradled in his arms. The three of them fit together perfectly, this family they'd built from impossible odds. "I love you," Geraldine whispered, running her fingers through Hope's soft hair. "I love you both." Min-gu's voice was rough with emotion. "My whole world right here in this room." Outside, Seoul was waking up. A city full of danger and beauty, violence and second chances. Inside this hospital room, Geraldine held her husband's hand and watched their daughter sleep and felt completely, impossibly safe. She'd survived foster care, law school, betrayal, and a Mafia council vote. She'd fallen in love in the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. She'd married a man who'd burned his world down to protect her. And now she had hope. A daughter who'd grow up knowing she was wanted, chosen, loved fiercely by parents who'd fought impossible odds to build this life. Min-gu shifted Hope slightly, his free hand finding Geraldine's and threading their fingers together. The jade ring on her finger caught the early morning light. Phoenixes and dragons intertwined, just like them. "Ready for the next adventure?" he murmured. Geraldine looked at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd become her everything, and smiled. "With you, always." Hope yawned in her sleep, tiny and perfect in theirs. And in that quiet hospital room, as Seoul's sunrise painted the sky gold, Geraldine realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for her entire life. Home. If you loved Geraldine and Min-gu's journey from that shocking first night to their beautiful family, hit that like button and let me know in the comments, would you take the risk for a love like this? Subscribe so you never miss another romance story, because I've got more dangerously irresistible tales coming your way. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's next.